I am Allison Bell. I will be your tour guide for the day. I am a senior developer over at Beeswax and have been in the FileMaker space for about 5 years now. Very similar to the opening remarks, definitely on the problem solver side of things. Love a problem, someone tells me I can't solve it, it's totally in my ballpark, and that's what I'm gonna chase down. So part of what we're gonna be talking about inside of mastering time is this idea of not only how one as an individual can master their time, but then within a team, and then as we have our consultants hats on, how can we help identify how clients not only can improve their systems, but maybe their workflows overall, identifying where best to really customize the software and then the business practices at large. That's kind of the roadmap for the day. Additionally, there is a fun FileMaker file that's open that you can play with that will be part of the speaker material that you get whenever Claris releases that. We'll see it highlighted in various bits and pieces through the session today, but that's something that you can kind of use to explore some of these techniques in your day-to-day outside of this space. Jumping in with a question. Are any of these statements relatable? Show of hands. Okay. If you are not raising your hand, you don't need to be in here, but I want to talk to you later and pick your brain with like millions of questions. Yeah, I think that this is really common avenues of how we feel our relationship with time goes, right? Another maybe less intuitive question. Would you say you are more like a thermometer or a thermostat? So when I ask that, what I'm asking is, a thermometer is something that is subject to its environment. It tells us what the temperature is in its space. A thermostat, on the other hand, can actually dictate the environment. It helps control the space that it finds itself in, assuming it's functional, right? And so the takeaway here is as we go through the various techniques, hopefully we're shifting out of a thermometer mindset and more into a thermostat mindset where we are controlling how our time is being used or how our client or team time is being booked and occupied, okay? A little bit more background as to kind of my love of time management. Once upon a time, I met a wonderful man who I married, and we thought it would be a great idea to open up a restaurant. And so in our early stages of engagement, we opened up a restaurant, which actually turned into 2 restaurants. And within our first 3 years, we found ourselves serving 1,000 to 1,500 people a day with a team of about 400 employees because we also had events and catering that we were doing kind of out of a commercial kitchen, and everything was from scratch. During that time, we also decided, why not have kids? So in the same 3 years, we had 2 boys that were 16 months apart. So here, newlyweds, restaurant 1, restaurant 2, baby 1, baby 2. And there's lots of hats that go into restaurant ownership and kind of entrepreneurship in general. So not only did I find myself as a front of house manager, but I was accounting, I was HR, I was onboarding, I was bill pay, I was client engagement in our world, what we would call, right? And I did not have enough time in my day, right? And very much was inside of that thermometer of like just moving from one fire to the next fire to the next fire. Very little intentionality or control inside of that dynamic. And so I did what I normally do is I went to those that are smarter and wiser than me for inspiration and answers to these kinds of questions, right? And so the techniques that we're gonna be going over are, they're tools in a toolbox, right? So they can be used together. They can be used as needed. Oftentimes I find as I'm moving out of thermostat and into thermometer is when I start to go back into the habit and the practice of one or all 5 of these techniques. The interesting piece is shifting out of restaurant world. So we ended up with 3 restaurants, which we then sold. And then I said I wanted to mom more than restaurateur and found my way to FileMaker. And was amazed at how effective those same time management skills were inside of a consulting space. And to be able to see someone, because if they're coming to you with a need, normally they're here and they're frantic and they need a solution to get more time, more efficiency, more productivity, right? So it's that same core element. So the same 5 tools carried right over into the FileMaker world for me. So here we are. These are the 5 techniques. They are simple, but that does not make them easy, right? The two are not synonymous. We're going to start with a priority matrix. How do you know what you're supposed to be spending your time on, whether that's personal time or business time, because time does not know the boundaries of what is professional or business, so the same practices can be used in both spaces. Daily listing, so this is now that I've established what's important, how do I really get it done or know what I'm meant to do? Then we're going to go into, okay, I know what I'm doing. How do I remove all the stuff that's getting in my way of getting that done, right? So that's removing bottlenecks. And now, as much as we love our to-do lists, things don't happen in a vacuum. We'll go into time blocking from there of now that we have these tools, where do they fit in our day-to-day rhythms? And finally, we'll learn how to vacation properly, which is probably my favorite of all 5 for obvious reasons. So let's jump right in. Priority matrix. This is also referred to as the Eisenhower matrix. The idea is that a task can be defined as either important, not important, urgent, or not urgent. Based off those qualifiers, it's going to land in one of those 4 quadrants. It becomes very tongue-twisting after a while to constantly be communicating of this is urgent but important and what am I, So we've kind of stripped out the titles and replaced them with colors, because who doesn't love colors? If something is important and it's urgent, it is a red list item. These are your fires. These are the things that aren't on the calendar, but now that they have occurred, everything else has to drop off. Things like, oh, the production server just crashed. I guess I'm going to attend to that immediately, right? Or I have an upset client on the call that needs to talk with us right now because we botched something, because we're humans and sometimes that happens, right? For obvious reasons, we don't want to be spending all of our time addressing red list items. Oftentimes, in using this tool, that's how you can differentiate like how good are your processes and systems, which leads me to your next one, green list items. These are your growth or your building ones. This is content or tasks that are important but not urgent. These are the kinds of initiatives that are going to intentionally move or grow your project, your team, your time, your business forward. Fun fact, almost every red list item is going to have a corresponding green list item that will negate that from happening in the future, right? The reason we have a red list item is an indication that we have a problem with a person, process, facility issue that needs to be mitigated. So your server crashes. Maybe we should go ahead and take a look at that server maintenance process. Do we even have one? We have an upset client. Where's our project success team? Maybe do we need to add a component into double checking there, right? So great way to get yourself out of drowning is not only dealing with your red list items, but finding what that right size green list task is behind it so you're not living in that same kind of reoccurring Groundhog's Day scenario. Urgent but not important. Blue lists. These are things that are cool. They're not really worth doing. They take up a lot of our time, though. These are the things that present as being important. Slack is exploding. Emails coming at you. But do you really need to look at that right now? And what if you're in the middle of some complex code or scenario that now that your focus has switched, you've lost a half hour, 2 hours worth of work as you're trying to remember what it was that you were doing and looking at the who wants to eat out on lunch on Friday, right? Or Uber's texting you saying, hey, I'm going to be late with your lunch, right? Like, oh, that feels like I need to respond, but at what cost, right? Finally, you have blacklist items. They are not worth doing. My personal favorite is shopping for things I don't need on Amazon, right? Where it's not urgent, it's not important, and there's a secret behind all of this, which is sometimes just knowing how you're spending your time makes you a better user of that time. And I was actually in preparation for my presentation, and I found myself working blue list items before walking into. I'm like, oh no, I'm in blue list. I should be in green list. I'm good, like talking about it. And there's kind of a nice accountability in just being able to name and identify, prioritize the type of tasks you're currently working inside of and where you need to go from there. Next, daily listing. Show of hands, who does to-do lists, checklists? Yeah, it feels really nice to get one of those things marked off, right? So super simple, and this is also known as the Ivy Lee method. If you have time, very cute story that goes behind it, or I'll be at the beeswax booth and I'm happy to share it with whomever. But the idea here is one would identify their 6 most important tasks, prioritize those, and you start at 1, you get as far as you can with it or accomplish it, then you go to 2, then 3, 4, so forth and so on. Things to keep in mind here. You put your rocks in first. So another great kind of parable or illustration of this is if you were to have a mason jar and the same quantity of rocks, pebbles, and sand, and you put your sand in first, then your pebbles and your rocks, you can't fit them all in. However, if you put your rocks in first, then your pebbles, and then your sand, you're able to put all of it in the same mason jar. The idea is your 6 tasks, the things that make this list are your rocks. They're the things that really need to get done and make the difference. If you prioritize them, you have a much higher likelihood of getting everything else fit into your day as well. For those of us that really want to get everything done, something to keep in mind, it's okay if not all 6 things get done. You would reevaluate at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day, and realistically, there's probably not a better way you could have gotten any more accomplished within the day. Sometimes you just don't get through all of the things you wish you could have. Finally, if you don't have a list, you're probably working somebody else's. Right? There are people who have goals, that have initiatives, that have a drive, and this is part of that consultant space. I find it very useful to go into a consulting conversation with the rocks that are important for that project, so that way the client doesn't come in with a bunch of sand to derail the effort, right? So having a clear sense of direction as you move into a space allows you to work what is important for you, for your team, for your project in a much more successful fashion. Okay. Yes, sir.
Talk about doing things, getting one thing done before you go on to the next, but don't you often find that you're blocked on that one thing? It's still important, maybe even urgent. Like the client who's upset with you, you call them and all you can do is leave a message. That's got to stay on your to-do list.
Yes, and that's sometimes you don't get it accomplished, but you'd start there, and maybe as far as you can get to it is the voicemail. And then you wait for it to pop back up, or there's credentials. You don't have credentials for a new file that you have. So there are obstacles. The goal isn't to do absolutely nothing else until that gets accomplished. It's to make sure you're pushing it as far forward as you can, and really not procrastinating with it. Right? The idea is that you're choosing to fit that in the time that you can, rather than either not knowing what's important and just moving your way through the day, or being afraid to tackle harder scenarios, right? Like who wants to call an upset client, right? But to know that that's important and just say, okay, it's top 6, we need to do it, right? And that helps kind of keep it from escalating into something worse. This is the FileMaker solution that I was alluding to. And here you can see we kind of have the blend of the priority matrix and the top 6 tasks. I'm curious if we have any brave volunteers. Those unassigned tasks, where would you categorize them?
I guess it depends on why they're in that list.
You must be a FileMaker. Context is king, right? Yeah, so need more information. So just shooting from the hip, if you didn't have more information.
Yeah, I would take that first one. It probably goes to the green, unless there's a reason, a horrible reason why it's there. Yeah. The last one looks green. First one might be red, but it might be.
Okay. So we'll play this out a little bit here. So, yep, missing credential. Oh, that was a red list item. Oh no, we had a client that needed a solution to get into right away. Wasn't there. Booking is, we're not procrastinators. Great, that's part of the green list. And we'll go back really quickly here. And so that hiring 3 new FileMaker devs, right? We're going to land in green but in the video, it'll wind up in red. And that's part of that context is king, right? Where maybe we need it in the green because we're growing the company. Maybe we just landed a giant client and they want deadlines we can't adhere to. So we feel like we're in this push to get more resources to be able to do it. So now it's red. And because this is my presentation, I set it up, I gave myself a lead into our next point that we're going to talk about, which is removing bottlenecks, right? So we have these green initiatives that we're trying to grow. How do we know where to start inside of it, right? And part of that is that same idea of, well, do I really need to hire 3 new FileMaker developers, or is my problem in my process somewhere else? So this is a great example also of being able to use some of this inside of client solutions. So bottleneck removing, great theory of thought. One of the components is the theory of constraint. Critical chain is another sister theory of it. It's kind of more in the project management zone. But the idea is that there is a bottleneck inside of normally process, and you would need to identify it. You would then exploit it. We'll go through what these are in more detail. Then you would subordinate the rest of the system to it. You would elevate it, and then you'd repeat the process. Sometimes the most difficult part of this is identification, right? How do you know where the bottleneck is? So, best way to learn is to do. Who can tell me in this simple example, we have machine A, machine B, machine C. You have 6 pieces per hour, 2 pieces per hour, 7 pieces per hour, and then you can ship and deliver or deploy. Where's our bottleneck?
B.
B, yeah. So how do you identify bottleneck? You find a person, process, piece of machinery, or policy that is causing a problem. What does a problem look like? It is a backup. Some projects aren't getting completed. There are literal emails that are piling up in someone's physical papers. If you're in heavy industry, a whole bunch of parts that are waiting to be processed further down the chain. So what you're looking for as a telltale sign of a bottleneck is where is everything else piling up? You can have multiple bottlenecks. Idea of a chain, you have a weakest link. How many weakest links can you have? 1, right? So you start with whatever pile is biggest, because that's your biggest problem, right? And as you go to resolve that, and I'm doing a little bit of a spoiler, you will always have a bottleneck. The goal, though, is that you're constantly growing and improving to a higher level of expertise or efficiency. So whatever bottleneck you're working on next, ideally is instilling perpetual growth and improvement as you go through this process, okay? So now we've identified it, and we say, got it, you're machine B. Or you could do departments, sales, production, accounting, right? So sales has sold a bunch of stuff. Developers are saying, oh my gosh, there's not enough of us. What are we going to do, right? You go into 2. You take it to its max. You exploit it. Great way to think about this. I'm a visual person, so it would be like a pipe and you throw Drano down it, right? You're not changing the width or the capacity of the pipe. You're just simply cleaning it up to perform at its utmost. So the developers might say, oh my gosh, I have no time, but maybe what that is, well, are there administrative tasks that I can take off of your plate so you can develop more, right? And or in industry world, what happens if we turn machine B on first before we start all the other machines to give it a few extra hours of processing time in compared to its other components, right? So for the purposes of our example, that's what we did. We turned machine B on before all of the rest, and we found that we have a net yield of about 1 additional piece more per hour. Great, but we're not done yet. So to subordinate, this one gets scary for some people. So the idea here is everything else now is examined through the lens of what the bottleneck needs. Ooh, that's scary, right? What does that mean? It's not as scary as it sounds. The idea, though, is, again, if these are departments rather than machines, if we have an ace sales manager that's coming in for hire, and we say, I think that they can double our efficiency, that's fantastic. Is that the best use of our resources right now? What happens if we sell double? Does that mean we have double upset clients further downstream because we're not able to act on them as quickly? Maybe they're an ace player and you just hire ace players because that's like a sound investment to make later on. the idea is not that everything needs to stop for it. The idea is that you take into consideration what the ramifications of that choice are on the bottleneck and see if that makes sense in furthering the agenda here. So in this case, we decided we were going to hire those 3 more developers. We're getting them up to speed, and they're helping us out inside of sales. So great. We have another, pieces, but maybe hours, right? Pieces per hour. But that's still our bottleneck. We haven't resolved it yet, so we're going to continue through the process. Elevation, to elevate. So this is where now we're starting to say, where do we need to invest either time, resources, training in order to further improve the bottleneck situation? We doubled the machine. This could be cross-training and getting more JavaScript or AI trained professionals on the team, so that way we have more cross-training, so we're not as wedded to vanilla FileMaker and then having to outsource specialized resources somewhere else, right? So ideally, by this point in time, your investment is a lot smaller than it otherwise would have if we started all the way back in A, like in that identification space, because we've really made sure the rest of this is running smooth by now. And if we've done it great, we've resolved it, right? We have fixed the bottleneck, but we have a new one, right? So where is our new bottleneck? A. Because A can't produce enough parts to satisfy B, right? And so on it goes, right? So then you're going back into identifying. A few things to keep in mind. You need to have your goal clearly identified. Otherwise, you're going to be doing all of this entirely in the wrong direction. So it is only as effective as your identified end product. In business, it's pretty easy. In business, the goal is to make money, right? Clients will have a micro lens of that. It might be to increase productivity. It might be to decrease speed. It might be to take all of the paperwork out of the office so that way they have it all digitalized, right? So whatever that direction is, to have a goal at the outset is quintessential to making the whole process work. Great with green list items. This is how when you've moved yourself out of running red list stuff, you're in green list stuff. Where do I start in the green list? Find your bottleneck, and then find the green list tasks that correlate with getting that removed for you. This is also great for long-term planning. A lot of times your bottleneck is not I can do a 2-hour thing and get it done. A lot of times it's here's a week, month, year endeavor to really get this resolved and get us to the next space. Not always, but typically that's how they manifest. Which brings us to time blocking, right? Which it kind of goes back to your question that you asked. Like, what happens if the client doesn't pick up the phone, I've left a voicemail? Or I have meetings today that I can't not go to, right? We have jobs and we have lives outside of just our list and our priorities. And how I have found a wedded mix between the two is in time blocking, calendar blocking. I'll use the first hour of every week, and I look back at my week I accomplished and see all the things I didn't do, and put them on a list. Then I look forward a week, month, depending on kind of the nature of the projects or tasks at hand, and I get my mise en place. I get all of my ingredients together that I need for the recipe I'm going to be making, so that way I don't get mid-baking and realize I don't have what I need and have to run out to the store, right? So I look ahead and pull all the things forward that I need to be ready to do that task when the time comes. Prioritize them, estimate how much time it's going to take, and put them on a calendar. Lots of calendar options out there, but there is something powerful about going through that estimating and putting it onto a physical calendar that really unlocks this technique and makes it effective. Similarly, a few things to keep in mind. As things come up, I love to either schedule them from bottom down or top up. What does that mean? That means someone says, hey, do you have time for a meeting? I say, yep, at 5 o'clock I do. And then as soon as 5 o'clock is full, I say at 4:30 I do. And at 4 I do. And I'll fill those things with some cushion, one after the other, either from the beginning of my day in or from the end of my day down, so it maximizes my empty space time. Another piece in there, I use color because I like data and numbers, and I can visually see what my week looks like when I look, because I know that my meetings are orange, I know my development time or my creative time is brown, and I know my personal time is blue. And so I can get a sense for what the feel or rhythm of that week's gonna be like in a glance. And then I can right size if that feels lopsided. Finally, knowing what type of time you're blocking. So there is creator time and there is manager time. Creator time looks like units of work that are 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours to really truly accomplish the task at hand. These are going to be deep thought, highly complex, more problem-solving nature. Doesn't have to be development. It can be an advertising plan. It's that creative endeavor where you need to get in the zone to produce something of value. Versus manager time, this is going to be multitasking. This is coordinating efforts, typically across teams. This is units of time of 30 minutes to an hour, right? The two do not go well together, right? And that's the other beautiful thing inside of time mapping is it's a communication tool. And so as you're working as part of your team or with your client, and you can then see, oh, when is that going to happen? Or can I bug them now? And there's an opportunity for just increased efficiency within a team dynamic and using kind of a shared methodology there if you are able to have that type of autonomy in your space. Like we've been doing, we're going to give this another try. So my calendar tool of choice is Sunsama, mainly because I have like 6 or 7 different types of calendars based off different clients. And Sunsama does a great job of pulling all of them into one space and then updating them all into their various spaces. So this is an honest to goodness week, a Monday morning shot of what like an oncoming week would look like.
Yeah. Can you just repeat the calendar?
Sunsama, upper left-hand corner there. Yeah. It also, so this inside of the FileMaker solution is actually just a web viewer, and it has a link to their homepage in there. And part of the reason I did is, one, I made the assumption that everyone would probably feel comfortable swapping that out with whatever calendar app they would like to use instead. 2, that made it easy for those of you who wanted to go find and dig, for you to have a quick opportunity to go explore for yourself. But for the purposes of the example, what was not real are the 6 tasks that are my top 6 in this example, right? And this is that idea of, okay, now I have my week mapped out. I've looked behind me. I've looked in front of me. Here are my empty spaces. Where do I go from here, right? So within the practice, right, I'm going to create them. So those are my 6 tasks that I had identified on the previous part of the application. I created records, for lack of a better term. Those aren't actual records. Inside of each one, I identified the date, how much time, and then the nature of the task. So the nature of task is in the coloring. And I fill them in. This is a what not to do. And I'm curious to see if anyone can identify why this is going to be a problem. You'll see a second problem here in a second. That's the second problem. I've overcommitted for the day. This is also why I like Sunsama, because it tells me you are being overambitious here. You have to stop. So I know those 2 tasks won't happen. But outside of the overcommitting for the day, what did I do wrong? Or how did I maybe create an obstacle for myself?
Split up your drafting of the advertising plan.
Yeah, right. So I'm splitting. I have this advertising plan that I have like 15 minutes here, and then I have this activity, and I have 30 minutes here, and then I have another activity. Is that really an effective way to come up with an advertising plan? Probably not, right? Because I'll get 15 minutes into it, then I'll have to drop it, prep for whatever I'm going to next. So a much better way to do that is, even though, going back to that idea of a block task, even though that advertising plan is number 1, I don't really have a good time to do that today. So then I have to make the choice of, am I going to move some of my other commitments around to make the time for it and get that rock in? Or are those other commitments such that I can't move it, and does that then become my number 1 priority for the next day, right? But now I'm not a thermometer anymore. I'm a thermostat, because now I'm actively making this choice on how I'm spending my time, and I'm not subject to the end of the day saying, oh my gosh, I got nothing done, right? And things will happen, right? But at least here I can already get a sense for what that day or week is going to look like. So, to our 5th, vacationing properly. This is actually a pretty doggone close epiphany moment, because this is where I ran in restaurant world into adopting this methodology. So we had all those things going. We had all the restaurants. We had the babies. I was wearing all the hats. I'm trying to figure out what is going on and how did I find myself in this crazy lifestyle. And my husband had the brilliant idea of like, we're just going to leave for a vacation. I was like, we can't leave for a vacation. Like the whole place is going to, nope, we're going to leave for a vacation. And we went, and the vacation was a complete bust. And we got really bored. Nothing worked out. And we just kind of got stuck doing nothing. And I realized that that was a really important part of the process. So we joke in our household, we say vacationing is not adventuring and it's not visiting friends and family. Vacationing is getting bored and resetting. And so annually, we take the time, normally around our birthdays, to take a step back. We get bored so we're not impacted by the fray of the day-to-day. And we evaluate, we do a wellness wheel, we'll go over that in a second, and look at kind of the 8 components of what make us human beings, rate ourselves objectively on how full and fulfilled are we feeling in those 8 pieces, and then recommit to our 3-year goal, 1-year goal, 4 quarterly goals, saying, okay, based off of what I just lived, do these still make sense and do I still want to pursue these things, right? And in this moment, we realized that we did not want to do the second restaurant that we had already started and gotten involved in. The second restaurant was almost 3 times the size of the first restaurant. We had about 370 seats in it, which we would flip about 3 times a Friday night and then again on a Saturday night. So it was, and it's the general public. So there's like all manner of additional thing that gets mixed up in that. And we said, we had these goals and ambitions for our family. I don't think this is the way we're going to get there. I am 100% convinced if we had not taken that vacation, we would still be in that rat race of chasing after it. And so we came back and we closed the second location and pivoted to, instead of a full service restaurant, a quick service restaurant. So more like a Chipotle or like a line and you assemble. And that was ultimately what sold. So when the time came years later, the part that was attractive to a buyer was not the successful, busy restaurant. It was the more simplified, very intentional, very structured thing that came out of the closure, which came out of getting bored and really realigning with what the professional and personal objectives for our family and our company were. So, things to keep in mind inside of that. The goal. The goal is everything. The goal is what's driving your priorities. Your priorities are then allowing you to determine how you're spending your days. Your days then become all of your calendars, and that's your life, right? And so if you don't have a clear goal at end, the rest of it kind of falls apart. And that's what for us was missing inside of all these other strategies we were using. It was in pursuit of an incorrect goal. So it was just running us into the ground that much faster, right? The second piece is start with the end in mind and not like this year end. Dream big, like get to the end in mind and start from that context because it's a lot easier to reverse engineer from that point than it is for the reality that's in front of you in the moment. So let's give it a try. Same FileMaker application that you can tinker inside of. You have the wellness wheel and its components over there on the left-hand side. For those of you that don't have great memories like myself, the definition of what those things are all inside of the icon there. It's a really cool web view over here with a graph, so as you fill in those numbers, you can actually see how your circle is showing up. Goal is not round, because if you have a whole bunch of ones and it's perfectly round, you're probably really depressed, and that's not a great life, right? So roundness isn't necessarily the goal. This is just information, right? Maybe we're okay with feeling less fulfilled in one of these zones. Maybe it just got ignored, and you need to adjust your goals in this next year to help fill that out a little bit more, right? So this is just a way to kind of check in with yourself before you do your goals. Important to do it in that order. Reassess, then do goals. Otherwise, you get biased goals and you have to do it all over again, right? Second piece is 3-year goal, 1-year goal, 4 quarters. Great way to kind of visualize how this would work. If I want to run a 50-mile race in 3 years from now, right? I need to start running today. right? But how do we get there, right? Maybe 1 year from now, a marathon is a great idea. How do I get to a marathon? Well, maybe my marathon, because I'm not a great runner right now, is going to be in my fourth quarter, not my second quarter. And I'm going to look for a half marathon in the third quarter. And then I'm going to do maybe a 10K in the second quarter and a 5K in the first quarter, right? So I can get myself up into that space. Very simple example, but a lot of times when we take those bigger goals and reverse engineer them, it allows us to really examine what the next right step needs to be in order to get us there. And for those of us that are detail oriented, don't go detail on 3 year out. Save your details for whatever quarter is immediately in front of you and spend your time there. There are only 13 weeks in one quarter. Isn't that scary? In one quarter, you have 13 weeks to accomplish whatever that thing is that you've set out for yourself. So if you're going details, go details with a quarter that's in front of you, and I would suggest it as weekly objectives, right? When you get into that first hour on your Monday morning, you say, okay, where am I lining up with whatever that task is that's going to further my initiative to my 3 year goal, right? So, in review, to make the transformation, you actually start with the vacation. Isn't that great? You love the session. Everyone go on a vacation, right? That's the message for today. No, but the idea is start with your goal, start with a reset, and then you can prioritize, then you can do your daily lists. Then you can go ahead and identify the bottlenecks that are worth investing in resolving. And then you figure out how to make that all work within the greater context of your life. Questions?
I do have a question. So sometimes I work on a project that takes days, and for me, that's a long time in my business. But every day, people are like, can you just do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And because the task they're asking about is so small, I tend to, let's do it immediately. So I always like pushing my real goal or my real job. It's like always being delayed because I always get these things. And I'm not sure what to do about it because that is not things that come from me. That's just people asking me. So do you have any tips for handling such requests all day long?
Scope creep, right? Yeah, so I think that there's, in human nature, when we are developing something, there's a level of ownership that we take over it. I think to own something well, it's less ownership and more stewardship. And so as a client comes in and says, hey, look, need you to do this thing, I love having the priority conversation. Great, we can definitely do that. At what cost? Right? And maybe not that way. It's like, okay, in order to do that, there's going to be these other things that are going to happen. Are you okay with that? Because the client may say, yeah, sure, that's fine. If I get it a day later, no problem. They might say, oh, no, that's not okay. In fact, never mind, continue on the course. So I think it's less about making the choice for them and more just giving them a little bit of the behind the curtain view of understanding what the implication of that so they can choose and help more actively engage in the development process or the project process.
Do you have another suggestion? Like, hide. Don't, honestly, don't check your email. Keep those channels muted.
I used to have an hour slot at the end of the day for all the little quickies so that I felt like I really accomplished a lot that day. I would wait till the very end of the day and then do a whole bunch of little ones.
I will say, no joke, in order to, there is something about, adrenaline kick. I will throw a blue list or a blacklist item in there when I'm trying to get back into habits just to feel good about it, to, have accomplished something. A great book, Make Your Bed. And this idea of, if I just start my day by making my bed, then I have successfully done something for the day, right? And so sometimes what you need is just that win, and to give yourself an easy, I got that done, can make the difference in giving yourself the motivation for the rest. Yeah.
I'm the CEO of my company, which used to be a lone developer. Now I don't develop at all. I do all the stuff that's not fun. And no, really, seriously, that's kind of how I feel about it sometimes. But we have a thing where we have a daily stand-up in the morning where everyone talks about this. What I did yesterday, this is what I'm going to do today. And I participate in that. I don't just ask everybody else to do it. Because what I find is that a lot of that stuff that I don't want to do and I procrastinate on, I just have to think about the fact that I'm still accountable to my team too, because like you said, it's a stewardship. And, I'm not just the boss, I'm also a participant who they rely on. And so just knowing that, I think, can be a great motivator to get some shit done.
Yeah. It is. I think that desire to, when you have to collaborate, whether it's with a client or within a team, having a common language, whether it's in stand-ups or part of a rhythm or process, can be really valuable. And that was kind of one of the unintentional side effects in adopting some of these within our company when we had restaurants, was it wasn't just relegated to my husband and myself. The managers knew it. The servers knew it, the kitchen knew it. And so in moments where there was a red list item, we could jump right away and have the trust that we're talking about the same thing a lot faster, which then got us to doing a lot faster as well. So there's something similar around calendar blockings. Not all companies or entities are set up to where you can see that. But getting in sync with your communication can be a huge way of moving the needle around how time is being effectively used within a project or within a company. Yeah.
I have one more. So I tend to, when there's was it black that was not important and not, yeah. So when I get one of those and it's a small one, I'm not sure if it's the correct solution, but I actually tend to do it immediately because then it's off the list again. So I can focus on the things that is important. I tend to do them first, because then I can get them out of the way. I'm not sure if it's correct. And secondly, I'm here because I am actually really bad at managing time. So, so I hope to.
Battle right there.
Yeah, and so I think to just reiterate, like these are tools, right? They're not the solution. They're not silver bullets. I'm going to mess up the idiom because I'm terrible at idioms, but there's the expression of once a problem has been identified, it's like 80% solved, making that number up. But the idea is the same thing with those matrix. Now you've named or categorized that thing. And now you can say, yeah, it's cool. I'm going to do blacklist. Not a problem. Where it becomes a problem is when you have accidentally started to spend your time that way, and now you wind up with not enough time unknowingly for the things that are important. So it's not like I'm still on Amazon looking for things to buy. It's not to say don't do those things. It's just to be aware of the active decisions you're making, and when you, and I still like, or catch yourself in the moment, like, oh no, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Let's, repoint ourselves. Yeah.
I'll think about it.
Yeah, go for it.
A couple additional thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One, I have an add-on list. Every meeting we sit down, if they come up with something that is not in scope, that I just say, okay, we'll put that down. If we get to it, great. If we don't, fine. And yeah, sometimes it gets to Friday afternoon, it's like, I don't want to think anymore. But here's a list of easy ones to knock out and go that route. Second point about doing anything in front of the client, I have been bitten more than once over the years. Then they think everything is that quick and easy.
Yeah.
And that then becomes another problem.
Yeah. Or the one I wind up with I think it's quick and easy, and then I'm there and I'm like, oh, yep, I should not have touched that. Like that was not something that I was meant to do in this moment.
They will take your arm.
I think like Scotty, where you just give them estimates. They're
Yeah,
too big.
4 times. Yeah.
Speak to what you were talking about earlier. Really what you're talking about, those like easy to do quick things, even though they're blacklist, that's like the make your bed thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I call those low hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. And I have actually little cherries icon on my self-made to-do list, which you guys can download if you want to. It's on the marketplace. It's called Mega To Do. But you can just mark those things. And whenever I feel like either I've only got 15 minutes till lunch, or whatever it is, just go through and get some of those things done. Those little, like you had the thing that was divided, that little 15-minute slot is the perfect place to put those things.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a beautiful commonality in both the techniques that you brought up is you're saving them to do like things together in a time that isn't robbing from something else that needs to get done, right? So that ability to hold, gather, consolidate like things, and then execute against them. So it's not like, and I'm in the middle of a 4-hour development block and I'm going to go ahead and do this other thing instead, right? Like that's when it becomes disruptive. But it is, right? You hold them and then when you can, you sneak them in and get the low-hanging fruit accomplished. Yeah, great. Yeah, yep.
So I loved your presentation. I was thinking about this aspect of, the unpredictable, right? So there's always the unpredictable of, I have to pick up my daughter from school right now. She's sick. So it's like, now I have to readjust the whole schedule. So I feel like time it's so great when it works the ideal way. But most of the time it doesn't. And we're very bad at estimating how long we think it's going to take to do something. So how do we work with all the real life time?
It's a great question. So the question is, how do we plan for the unexpected, right? And move from there. I think there's two pieces in that. One, buffer time is a great saver inside of that. So as you're going, if you've slammed your day together as soon as the unexpected, which happens every day without fail, it's not just derailed one thing, it's derailed the day, right? The other part that's useful that I've found in at least the time blocking is now I know what I have to move, right? I don't have to go back through a mental checklist of like, what's over here and where do I need to go? So I'm able to pivot far more effectively and a lot less falls between the cracks. And so it's not to say that because we've planned it, it's going to go that way. It's to say, at least I know what I'm supposed to be doing, so that way when it doesn't go that way, I can more quickly and thoroughly adjust the plan for how the day has come to pass. I hope your daughter doesn't get sick frequently. Okay, last question, and then we'll be, I think, at time.
Combining a couple of things, I'm curious how you apply, well, personally, if you have competing demands or competing, we alluded a little bit like client work versus like non-client work and things like you give the example with your family, but then you're also balancing like work demands as well. I imagine like how do you like reconcile those two things? Because the business, the restaurant, your example, might have different like demand be placing on you. What is the restaurant's red list versus like your family's red list could be two very different things. Like, and similarly, if you're working on a more higher level, like the business side versus the client project, like have you found any useful strategies, I guess, for like being able to put this is a red list item in the scope of the project, in the context of the project, but not necessarily in the larger context and like where those lines might lie?
So I would.
I mean, put you on the spot. Sorry, Allison.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And I feel like my response would be, time is time, and your priorities can only be spent one way, right? And so we may have this idea that we can categorize things differently, but the end choice that we're still making is, how am I going to spend that next time? And so you can't isolate components. You have to prioritize all in one. There are days where my top 6 items are all personal. Like, we have a trip they're going to in Costa Rica, family's passports, the doctor's office misspelled my husband's name on the birth certificate incorrectly, so there's this whole like backlog of issues that I'm then like trying to untangle, right? Which may not seem like a big deal because we're not leaving for several months, but what I'm finding is I can't focus because I'm stressing out, right? So the task itself might not necessarily be pressing, but its influence on how I'm able to engage with the task at hand can elevate its importance, because maybe I just need to get that resolved so I can be present in whatever's in front of me. I also messed up the time, so we have time for more questions, I think. Yeah, cool, yeah.
I can give you an idea on that. One small shop have to wear a lot of hats, right? So yeah, for doing the CEO stuff and that kind of thing, I try to keep that to Fridays. Stuff comes up, you have to adjust. But leave some buffer time every day. Something's going to happen. But yeah, pick a time that works best for you. Development wise, I'm typically better in the morning. If I get up at 5 o'clock, I'm ready to go. It's already in my head. It's been, I've been laying in bed for an hour. Get up, just start working. and get a lot of stuff knocked out. 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
Take care of the tax.
That's the meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
How much time do you spend thinking about time? 'Cause I feel like
So, great question. Actually, because I'm this. So, green on my calendar is what I try to hold myself to. I feel like I'm running a successful week if I spend my 1 hour on Monday and about a 15-minute check-in to reacclimate in the beginning of each day is what I like to try, because there's a cost in the switch and the shuffle, right? So even just in reassessing how I'm spending my time is maybe not an effective way to do it. Going back to kind of your question, the other piece that I found really valuable is at the end of the week, I see how accurate I was in my estimates of time. And just the practice of looking back to see how terrible I am at estimating time has helped me gauge that better. So I moved from like everything being wrong to like I'd say I'm at like a 45 to 50% like accuracy rate, and like, okay, this feels like this kind of an effort, so I'm gonna need about this time. Far from like an expert inside of it, but at least to just throw a number and not reassess doesn't give that number any value. So I would say if you are estimating, write it down. Another reason I like Sinsama is you can actually start your time against what that task was, and it'll kind of yell at you. You're like, oh, you're supposed to be done now. Are you done? It's like, oh, no, I'm not done. Okay. So I needed more time for this. And it, rather than having to have dedicated reflection time at the end of each week, it's kind of training me to assess while it's top of mind, and I'm working inside of it at the moment. Yeah. Go for it.
So how much transparency do you give of your calendar to others?
As much as they want.
No, it's because usually have shared calendars and people are just finding blocks within that calendar to set up meetings with me. And it's also not just me, it's 6, 8 other people all over the world. And so to do this, it seemed like I have to do it in a silo where I take everybody's wants and go, okay, where can I fit everybody in? But do I expose this to others? Is this like, it feels like this is like your journal of time.
Like that, yeah.
But how do you expose that without being burdened by it?
So a few pieces there. One is that's kind of a personality question too. Because I think for me, I love directness, I love transparency, and I'll like tell you what happened at my doctor's appointment right after I've been, right? That is not the same level of comfort that others have. Going back to the goal is this is an organization tool and a communication tool. So if it is effective to have this viewable by other members in your team or organization or clients, then I would suggest use that as such. If there isn't a time that works for everybody, then you have a conversation around it, right? The tool component, right, the organizational part of it is now you know what you're willing to compromise to get to that mutually shared time slot. So this is not to say that's how my week went. That's to say that's where I was starting, and then when someone said, hey, can I have that meeting, or can I add this, or can you do that? When I said yes, I knew what I was agreeing to in that moment, right? So it's not, this is it, don't talk to me, we're done. It's I think this is a great way to have a successful week, and then as stuff comes up, now I can not throw the entire week out and reshuffle all over again. Is that, yeah? Okay. Yes.
Just kind of a comment riffing off of a question from over here, and you, a big part of this for me personally is balancing home and work, right? And a lot of the red items that sort of come up tend to be more home-based than work-based. And so what I really like about the looking back and looking forward is looking back at the last week and going, this was my plan. This is where all the red items tended to happen. Oh, they're usually between 3 and 6 because that's when my kids are home, right? So maybe I adjust my schedule and I block off and I know, okay, that's the problem time. That's when I'm going to plug all my blacklist stuff, right? That I can easily set aside if not. So that's just thinking about this whole process for the idea of looking at last week, identifying, oh, this is where all the red items happened, both in work and home, and saying, okay, now next week, this band of time is problematic, maybe I don't put in all my dev time then, right?
Yeah, and that's, again, tools in a toolbox, right? None of these are, one, they're all suggestions. Two, use them and learn from them, right? I love to think I'm a master carpenter, then I get out there and I'm like, ooh, that didn't turn out the way I thought. But the more you practice something, the more it becomes a habit, the more you're learning and actively engaging with it. Again, going back to the thermometer versus thermostat, the more you are in control of your environment and less subject to it, which would then be that mastering of time piece. Yeah.
Is there any kind of thought process that you put into identifying what's going to go into which spot? I mean, you've got your green, black, blue, red. We leave that empty, ready for emergencies. But I'll sometimes find what I guess would be considered a blacklist item, even if I'm still doing development. It's some really cool project that's coming up. Oh, I've got to learn this fancy thing. I'm going to check it out and see if I can actually do it, even though I don't need to be doing that right then. And I'll just get lost in it. But I guess I'll tell myself that that's work and it's what I need to be doing. But it's not. I've got things that I need to do. Is there any kind of thought process to try to, I guess, pull yourself and make sure that you're doing those green items and not freaking yourself into it?
Yeah, so that, for me, that comes here on my calendar where I can, similarly, I'm fresh in the mornings. So doing it when, I'm less inclined to be enticed into something fun. And then I can look back and I'm like, that's right. This is I had said to myself that I wanted to get these things done. And then does it work every time? No. But at least, again, it becomes a passive thing that you just get teased into, and it becomes an active choice. And so ultimately, the goal is that you are the one who, you know, right? You've named it, and you're like, okay, well, we're going to do it anyways, and I understand that there are going to be consequences, but just to have that awareness to it, rather than to get lured into it, I think is the biggest piece. And then you can, it's course correction, right? You get into it a little bit, oh, nope, hold on. And not being afraid to put down something that you know you're probably not, isn't the best use of your time to recorrect into something that may be more productive. Cool. Question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, how do you feel about systems that organize, like AI systems that organize your time for you? I've seen some things where they have these ads, and they just take over and fill every possible spot.
So I love the idea of it. I have found that I'm still a little on the control freak side of things. That being said, I think if I had supplied the AI with enough of a story beforehand or with more content so I could trust its discernment more than my own, it would be fine. The other piece for me is that I like the tool and I have a nice rhythm inside the tool. So that might be a blacklist item. I might pull up a calendar AI and run it side by side and see how it did in comparison to my own. I haven't found one that I've fallen in love with as of yet. Not to say that there isn't one out there, and I'm open to suggestions if there are any. Yeah.
One very important question. Are you really moving into a boat?
It's on the, that was part of our 10-year goal, and it is now on the 3-year horizon. And so we have, it was that was part of the why we wanted to do restaurants, was we wanted to do restaurants to have enough capital to be able to circumnavigate the globe with our family. And so we had, the restaurant avenue didn't get us all the way there, but we are positioned ideally in about 2 years from now to be able to make the fiscal decision of does it make sense to actually do this, and or is this not a great idea? And then we'll probably, so yes, as it gets closer, I get more nervous and I get progressively more and more cold feet around it. But yeah, I grew up internationally. My parents were diplomats, so I had the luxury of moving every 2 or 3 years, and I felt like as a child I just got a lot out of that kind of experience and would love to be able to give that as an experience for my kids.
Great story.
Yeah.
Wish I would do that.
Yeah, there's still time. Put it as your 5-year goal. Okay, we are at time. Thank you all for coming to the session. And if you have more questions, I'll be at the Beeswax booth.